At this time, it's my pleasure to call up the candidates for House of Representatives, District 20, Dr. Casey Lucius and Mr. Jimmy Panetta. Please. A little bit of housekeeping. When you wish to speak, you need to push the button in front of your mic, and that will give you the mic. Do you want to do a test run? Okay. Dr. Lucius, you have the first opening statement. You have 30 seconds, please.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for coming this evening, and to the Farm Bureau and the BenitoLink for hosting this event. I'm especially excited to see all of the young people in the room being part of this political process. In the 20 seconds I have left, let me just share that I started my career as a waitress. I then joined the Navy and spent 7 years on active duty in the U.S. Navy. I came to the Naval Postgraduate School where I got my master's in national security affairs, and then went to Hawaii for a PhD. Thank you.
Mr. Panetta, please speak.
Thank you. The Farm Bureau, BenitoLink, Casey, all of you.
So push that little button.
Thank you to the Farm Bureau, BenitoLink, Casey, all of you. I appreciate being here. As a kid, I often came to Hollister. As a high school student, I came here, played sports against the hay balers, and yes, got our butt kicked plenty of times. And it's ever since I've announced, I've come here. And I want you to know that I am committed to not, if I'm elected, to not just coming here, but to making sure that everybody here in San Benito County and this area is represented just like every other area in the 20th Congressional District.
I applaud you both. I don't think I could do that in 30 seconds. Okay, we will begin our questions. Our first question will be addressed to Jimmy Panetta. Our region has a large immigrant population, and our primary industry, agriculture, relies heavily on a migrant workforce. What are your immigration policies, and how do you intend to balance them with the labor needs of the ag industry?
Thank you. Look, having grown up here, I've realized that immigration reform is very important to not just agriculture, but to the Central Coast of California. That's why I've always said comprehensive immigration reform is my #1 issue, hands down. And the way we can do that is by looking at what was passed in the Senate in 2013. Senate Bill 744. That was a comprehensive immigration bill that dealt with border security. It dealt with a change in the visa process, making the H-2A process under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, making it from 1 year to 3 years, and doubling the H-1B. So it's about jobs not just in the Salinas Valley, here in San Benito County, but in Silicon Valley as well. And then it's also making sure that we have a pathway to citizenship. And on that bill, it was a very difficult pathway to citizenship. 13 years of a pathway, during which time you couldn't have a felony, you had to pay fines and fees, you had to have a job, you had to learn English. It was very difficult, but after 13 years, you bet that's important. Comprehensive. It's not just about the farmers, it's about the farm workers as well. Bringing people out of the shadows, making sure they contribute not just to our country, but to our community. It's an economic thing. The CBO determined that comprehensive immigration reform would bring $300 billion to Social Security, $685 billion to reducing the debt, $1.5 trillion to the economy. It's an economic thing, it's a humane thing, it's the American thing. Comprehensive immigration reform, not just piecemeal, but taking everything into part. And we can do that if we have a president who's willing to do it, a Speaker of the House who's willing to worry about being a good speaker, and your representative who wants to make sure that we have comprehensive immigration reform. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lucius?
Thank you. I will agree that comprehensive immigration reform is absolutely something that we should strive for. Unfortunately, it's a very divisive issue, and it's a very political and partisan issue that the two parties can't seem to agree on. What I would like to approach is something that's practical, not ideological, solution-oriented, and something that can actually be achieved, and that's specifically H-2A visa reform. Nationwide, the agricultural industry uses about 3.2 million, or I should say they need 3.2 million H-2A visas every year. Congress set the cap at 140,000. So the first thing we need to do, and the first thing I would do as your representative, is remove that cap. Then I would place the H-2A visa program under the Department of Labor and allow the Department of Labor to work with the agricultural industry to figure out what those numbers are. What are the numbers that are required for H-2A visas? It's actually a very cumbersome process for the employers to apply for those visas. They're about $400 for each application. In some cases, employers are applying for 500 to 700 to 1,000 of these visas, so that really adds up. There's an insurance requirement, a housing requirement, transportation requirements. It's very cumbersome. So we really need to streamline that process. I believe that we can do it with the Department of Labor, working with the industry, get the numbers that we need, and get H-2A visa reform passed. Once we accomplish that, then we could move on to H-1B visas, H-2B visas, and we can accomplish comprehensive immigration reform, but we do it in a way that isn't partisan, it isn't ideological, and it really focuses on the workforce.
Thank you. Dr. Lucius, this second question is for you to begin with. What is your philosophy about the role of the federal government, and do you think having more regional control or decision-making power would help represent both the urban and rural parts of your district better?
Yes. So let me share one of the themes that I have heard consistently over the last year while I've been campaigning. I hear constantly that businesses in this state are just being hammered by regulations. There are so many regulations, increase in taxes, increase in wages, environmental inspections, license fees, increase in unemployment insurance, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And it's so hard for businesses to be successful in this state. And I really believe that there is a role for the federal and state government, of course, but ultimately we want to give the most authority and autonomy at the local level because we want our businesses to thrive and be successful and be able to offer jobs. In fact, in this district, we still have double the unemployment rate compared to the national average. And it's because businesses cannot be successful with all this regulation. I'll give you another example, water. In this county in particular, we need to focus on water storage, but it's the federal government and 9 federal agencies that get in the way of us making local progress. We need to get back to giving autonomy to the local water districts and water agencies and get some of those federal agencies out of the way.
Thank you.
Look, this question is understandable because let me tell you, the number one question I get out there is, why the hell do you want to go back to Washington, D.C. right now when it's so dysfunctional and nothing's getting done? And why can't we do things here locally? So I understand this question, but the reason I think that the answer is that we need to continue working together. It's about basically having faith in the process and making sure that there's communication, coordination, and recognition. You have to have communication. You have to be able to make sure that we come together and talk about the issues that affect this area, the Central Coast of California. You can do that by, for example, over in Monterey County, there is a farm workers committee that is under the agricultural commissioner. And basically, it allows the farm workers and the farmers to talk together. It's that type of thinking that needs to come forward, that type of communication. There needs to be coordination. As your federal representative, you need to make sure that we coordinate these issues that come about. Look, I agree. Regulation, people, especially people in agriculture, have been getting hit from all sides, county, state, federal government. We need to be able to come together to make sure that these regulations aren't conflicting, they aren't burdensome, and they aren't overwhelming. And I believe that the federal representative should make sure that there are meetings to coordinate people coming together and to talk about these issues. The third thing is that there needs to be recognition. Look, the farmers pivot. People in agriculture constantly pivot. That's their nature. They're always pivoting to survive. They have to. And they do that with regulation. But when they do that, they need to be recognized. They need to be rewarded, and there needs to be incentives to make sure that people in agriculture are recognized and rewarded, especially the people who appropriately and accurately put forward those regulations and make sure that they apply them. They need to be recognized as well.
Thank you. For our third question, we address you, Jimmy Panetta. San Benito County is the smallest county, population-wise, in the district. What sort of presence will you have in the county, and what will you do to ensure that the county receives equitable attention and resources during your time in Congress?
Yeah. Once again, it gets back to working together and making sure that you don't just show up, but that you serve the people of this district. It's amazing how many times I come here and people make it a point to tell me not about what goes on in Washington, D.C., but about the service that they received right here from our past Congress members. These are personal stories where they help them, be it on immigration, affordable housing, or a benefit issue. That's what's important. That takes coming here, showing up. That takes making that personal connection. That's not easy to do. It takes a lot of work. I understand that. But that's what the job's about. Second thing, there needs to be coordination. Look, I understand that the fire department lost their SAFER grant, $1.145 million for 12 employees. The reason being here in Hollister, the reason being is that the application wasn't as detailed as enough. There needs to be more coordination with the Congressional office to make sure that grants like that are done correctly and done appropriately so that we can talk about that, so that when they put it forward and it's accepted or declined, they know exactly why. Third thing, look at the issue of the San Justo Reservoir. That's something that, since January of 2008, it's been closed. There needs to be leadership there. There needs to be coordination, and it should start with your congressman's office. I understand that the issue is basically coming up with a solution, as well as funding out of the Bureau of Reclamation. But that's something that the Congressional office needs to be in charge, needs to be basically take the lead on. There needs to be here. They need to not only be concerned with their constituent services so that they can serve them and act as that bridge from the government back here to San Benito County.
Thank you. Dr. Lucius, would you like the question repeated, or?
No, I understand the question. Thank you. And let me just start by saying one of my priorities would be to make sure that I have a district office right here in Hollister, and make sure that I personally have an open door policy and that the office is fully staffed. So even if I'm not personally here, to make sure that I have that liaison with the residents of this district. I think that's particularly important. I will also fight for federal funding, such as the SAFER grant and FEMA funding for this district. We need to make sure that it isn't an application process that gets in the way of making sure that we have the health and safety resources in this county. I also think it's particularly important to advocate for the national park, for the pinnacles, and we want to have that gateway here in San Benito County to drive more tourists to this area. Furthermore, I think it's particularly important that we elevate this region, all three counties of this district, to a national infrastructure protection program. We need to do that because of our ag industry and everything that goes with ag, which includes transportation, which includes water and affordable housing, as well as immigration reform. All of those things are needed to have a successful agricultural industry. And as you all know, we produce enough food here to feed the rest of the country. So we need the roads that food can be transported on, we need the labor, we need the housing, and we need the water. The best way to assure all of those things is to see them as a network and then look at how we can derive a solution. The Department of Homeland Security has a Department of Critical Infrastructure Protection. I would elevate this county and this region to be part of that critical infrastructure so that we can get Department of Homeland Security funding to resolve the issues within those areas.
Thank you. Again, Dr. Lucius, this is a question for you. The long-term security of freshwater supplies, the long-term security of freshwater supplies is threatened by aging infrastructure, aquifer depletion, pollution, and climate variability. If elected, what steps will you take to help San Benito County improve its water supply?
Oh, yes, thank you. I mentioned already, 9 federal agencies that make it very difficult to implement local water projects. There is a bill that has been introduced by Senator Feinstein, which is a California Drought Relief and Recovery Act. I think it's particularly important that we get that bill passed. And as a member of the House, I would certainly push for that bill to be passed in the House of Representatives, because what it would do is it would bring federal funding to this district so that we can upgrade our water infrastructure infrastructure. It would also address the Endangered Species Act, which, as we know, that often gets in the way of conducting local water projects. It also addresses additional pumping during the winter storm season, and it helps to streamline that permitting process, giving state oversight, environmental oversight, and again, giving authority back to the local water agencies and water districts. So that's a very important thing that we need to do. And in this county in particular, it's a little bit different in each county in the district, but in this county in particular, we really need to focus on water management. So we don't necessarily need a new water source, but we need water management and we need new infrastructure for our water. Additionally, I would just say in some of the other areas where we need to focus on new sources of water, that's where we need, again, to really emphasize getting that Senate bill passed and making sure that we have federal funding. This is California's 10th drought. It's gone on now, 6 years? We will have an 11th drought. We need to have a state emergency water plan, and we need to make sure that we get funding right here to this district.
Thank you.
Thank you. Because water is obviously an isolated issue, you usually have isolated solutions. And I commend San Benito County for coming together with the Hollister Urban Area Water District and basically combining the Sunny Slope Water District with the San Benito County Water District in order to work on its quality of water as well as its quantity of water. That's important. But I also think when it comes to water solutions, we have to think outside the box. Look, here in the West, we've had over 16 years of drought. I believe that the states need to come together and have a Western regional partnership to come up with a strategy as to how we're going to pay for these local solutions when it comes to dealing with our water issues. Also, I feel that there needs, on a national level, I appreciate Senator Feinstein's bill and her long-term $1.3 billion it has in investing in our water infrastructure just here in California. But I also think there needs to be a water innovation lab. If you look at it, if you look at energy innovation, the United States has 17 labs, not one about water. So I would propose and support a water innovation lab. But then I wouldn't just limit these solutions to here in the United States. We must look internationally. I say this all the time. If you look at Israel, what they went through, there was a national security issue for them. They didn't know what to do. They undertook a water revolution. Now it's not a problem for them. 54% of the water that they use is from desalination. 86% of the water that they use to irrigate their crops is recycled. That's the type of thinking we need to have, not just nationally, not just regionally, but locally as well. We need to look at those projects.
Thank you both. At this time, we will begin our closing statements. You have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and Jimmy Panetta, you have the first choice.
Thank you. Look, I can't stress enough the stories that I hear each time I come to Hollister about the service that the people here in this county have received from their Congress member. That's what inspires me to run for Congress, because I do believe that you can give people a better life in this position. I say that based on where I'm from, what I have done, and what I hope to do if I'm elected to represent you. This is my home. My Italian immigrant grandfather came here and basically to live the American dream. And we were always told in our household, look, because you're allowed to live the reality of that dream, then you dang well better give back to this country and community that gave you so much. That's why I served. That's why I served as a prosecutor from East Oakland to East Salinas. That's why I served in Afghanistan. And that's why I continue to serve here, the veterans of our community. And I'm proud to say on October 11th, next Tuesday, we'll have the opening of the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery, which I worked on. It's that type of service that needs to be done in Washington, D.C. We need to go there not to do nothing. We need to go there to get things done, especially with comprehensive immigration reform and the other issues that we've talked about. It takes that type of attitude. I realize there's dysfunction there, but the fact is that we need people to go there who are willing to roll up their sleeves and deal with the other side, to work across the aisle. That's what I do every day when I go to court. As a prosecutor, who do I go into court and I deal with? Defense attorneys. Guess what? 95% of the time, we come to a deal. but it also takes knowing which cases you're going to go to the mat on, which cases you're going to take to trial, which cases you're going to push forward. It takes that type of discretion and common sense. People know me, they know my service, and that's why they support me. That's why I've received the support of every single supervisor here on the Board of Supervisors in San Benito County. And that's why I have other supporters as well, because they know not just what I've done, but what I will continue to do as your U.S. Congress member. And for more information, please go to my website at jimmypanettaforcongress.com. Thank you very much, and I humbly ask for your support.
Thank you. Dr. Lucius, you have 2 minutes.
Yes. Thank you again for hosting this event. And I'll just start by saying, oftentimes people ask me, you know, it is dysfunctional in Washington, so how will you get anything done, especially as a freshman? Well, there is good news. There is a women's caucus. The women's caucus is made up of Republicans and Democrats, and women only make up 19% of the members in the House of Representatives, but 60% of the legislation that gets passed comes out of the women's caucus. Women are being collaborative, cooperative, and productive in Washington, D.C., and getting things done. And we have never had a woman represent this district. I think it's really exciting that this is an open seat, that I'm able to run for this seat, and that there's the potential to be the first woman to represent this district. I also want to share with you what my priorities would be. One would be H-2A visa reform, because like I said, it's not ideological, it's not partisan, it's just practical, and it's something that we can accomplish. The other would be passing the Drought Relief and Recovery Act, the water bill, to get us federal funding for water. And then finally would be affordable housing. We need affordable housing in this district desperately. And I grew up living in affordable housing, so I feel very passionate about that. And I see affordable housing as an investment that we need to make in building more apartments and making sure that people can buy homes that are affordable. But through legislation and through federal funding, we need to make sure that people do have that experience of owning their own home and experiencing the American dream. I had that experience in 2009, and I want others to have that same opportunity. And I'll just close by telling you, when I was growing up, we didn't talk about politics. We didn't talk about policy in my family. I didn't come from a political family. We talked about hard work. We talked about service. We talked about keeping your word. And those are the characteristics that we need in Washington, and that's what I will bring to Washington, and I will go and work for you. Thank you.
Dr. Lucius, Mr. Panetta, thank you both very much for your time. At this point, we will proceed to the Assembly District 30.